When the Pacific War began, Japan did not march into battle with heavy steel monsters. Japan sent light machines, thin armor, small guns, engines that strained on hot island slopes, and crews who knew, even before the first shot, that they were stepping into a fight they were never meant to survive. The most common of these machines was the Type 95 Hago, a light tank barely taller than a man. Its armor was so thin that a heavy machine gun could punch through the side. Its cannon, a small 37mm gun, could knock out trucks and small bunkers but little else. Yet the soldiers who climbed into it did so with absolute obedience. They fought in China. They fought on the plains of Manchuria. And then they found themselves on Pacific Islands, where there was no room to maneuver and no hope of reinforcement. Older veterans from the United States and Australia often remembered the sound of the Hago long before they saw it. The engine gave off a high-pitched rattle that echoed through palm groves and coral valleys. When the tank appeared, it moved like a thin metal box on narrow tracks, raising dust or spraying coral chips. It came forward bravely, but bravery could not stop incoming fire. The men inside the Hago knew their tanks were too light, so they made changes. They bolted spare track links to the hull. They wrapped ropes, logs, and toolboxes around the turret to catch incoming rounds. Some crews even welded steel plates taken from wrecked trucks. These were desperate attempts to survive a few minutes longer. Then came the Type 97 Chi-Ha, a medium tank by Japanese standards. Still light by every other measure, but better. Stronger turret, wider tracks, more reliable suspension. And, in its improved form, the Shinhoto Chi-Ha carried a high-velocity gun that could punch through Allied armor at close range. Japan hoped this tank would change the tide. But the Pacific did not care about hopes. The islands fought back with heat, mud, and terrain that punished every machine. The Chi-Ha climbed volcanic ridges. It crawled through mangrove swamps. It rolled across cane fields and coral beaches that tore the rubber from road wheels. The tank could fight, but it rarely fought on its own terms. By the time these tanks met American Marines on islands like Guam, Saipan, and Peleliu, the difference in firepower was impossible to ignore. Marines carried weapons that could burn through thin armor in seconds, an anti-tank rifle grenade, a satchel charge, or the pointed jet of a flamethrower. Many tanks died not from shells, but from Marines who ran up behind them, climbed onto the engine deck, and forced explosives through ventilation grills. One hidden truth is this: many Japanese tanks on these islands were already damaged before the battle even began. They had been shipped over coral reefs, dragged across barges, and landed under fire. Some arrived with cracked hull seams. Some lost road wheels before they reached their defensive positions. Mechanics worked day and night in open-air workshops with no spare parts. Every tank that could move was sent forward. Every one that could not was dug into the sand and turned into a steel bunker. And then there were the strangest tanks of all. The Type 2, Kami amphibious tanks used by Special Naval Landing Forces. These machines could swim with pontoons attached to the hull. They crossed open water. They approached beaches under the cover of darkness. Once ashore, crews jettisoned the pontoons and fought like normal tanks. It was a bold idea, but it was born in a war that did not allow bold ideas to flourish. On islands like Saipan and Biak, Kami tanks were trapped by reefs, flooded by waves, or destroyed before they reached the sand. On Peleliu, marine accounts tell of Japanese tanks charging at night in near silence, engines barely idling, drivers guiding their tanks by moonlight to avoid revealing themselves. Some crews approached so close that Marines heard the quiet clatter of track guides before the tank emerged from the palm shadows. But once the fight began, the tanks were hopelessly outmatched. One of the sadder truths is that Japanese tank crews rarely backed away. Retreat was not part of their doctrine. They often charged until they were destroyed. On Guam, a full Japanese tank company attacked down a narrow coastal road after dark. Every crew knew the enemy had superior firepower. Still, they drove forward. By dawn, every tank lay burned along the road. Their engines melted into the sand. On Saipan, a Chi-Ha commander refused to abandon his wrecked tank. He fired the turret machine gun until the barrel jammed. Then he fought outside the vehicle with his sidearm. Stories like this appeared again and again across the islands. In the end, Japanese tanks did not fail because their crews lacked courage. They failed because they were designed for a different war. They were built for the plains of China, not the volcanic killing grounds of the Central Pacific. They had thin armor, small guns, no radios in many units, limited fuel, limited parts, and enemies who brought more firepower, more support, and more logistics to every fight. By the end of the war, the tank forces of Japan were shadows of what they had once been. Many tanks were buried in the sand as bunkers. Many burned beside ridges where they tried to charge. Some still sit on islands today, rusted into coral rock. These machines did not survive the Pacific War, but the men inside them fought with a determination that deserves to be remembered. They fought in heat that warped metal. They fought in jungles that swallowed engines. They fought in battles that offered no escape. They fought even when they knew they could not win.